All right, folks, it's 6:30. Welcome to another night of Master Beef here, for the 2024 Master Beef webinar series here in Tennessee. Tonight marks our halfway point, believe it or not, so I'm super excited to introduce Dr. Josh Maples here with us tonight. I'll let him take it from here. Thanks, Dr. Maples.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to join y'all. Me trying to get some stuff shuffled around here so that I share the correct screen for you. Get to it real quick. All right, I think I found it. So, anyways, thanks for the chance to come speak with you. I really enjoy speaking with Tennessee groups any chance I get. So I grew up in way north Alabama. One of the farms that we have cattle on, the farm that my parents live on, is about a mile south of the Tennessee line in Limestone County, Alabama. So we spent a lot of time in Giles County, and certainly very familiar with the Tennessee cattle industry from growing up pretty close and attending a lot of meetings. So even though I'm sitting here in Starkville, Mississippi tonight, I appreciate the chance to be talking with folks closer to home. I've got a fun topic tonight, and so they messed up and gave me freedom to choose my own topic. So if you can get after the organizers a bit there, but I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here. Let's make sure it works.
While
How
he's
does
getting,
that work?
oh, that looks great.
Okay.
Just a quick reminder, if anyone has any questions throughout the night, the Q&A box and the chat box are again available, and we'll get those answered throughout the day.
Perfect. Thank you. So I've kind of, it's a fun time to talk about cattle markets right now. Cattle prices have been really strong. So I've titled this presentation Profit and Risk Considerations for Selling Cattle. So targeting this towards folks who have cattle or anticipate having cattle to sell, and what are some things that are important to helping you get the most amount of money for those cattle that you have. We're going to dig into some of the work that's been done across the U.S., not just at Mississippi State, but at other universities too. And then we're also just going to kind of look at some of the things that the management practices that can be done to help you get the most money for your cattle. On the risk side, we're going to dig into LRP a little bit. So looking at how you can use LRP to help you manage your price risk. We don't have enough time to go super deep into that, but at least want to introduce the topic in case it's something that you haven't thought about yet. I'll jokingly show you this title. This is the one that I get asked for the most right now. Cattle prices are high. How long is it going to last? A lot of us were around. You'll see my son Jack in the background. A lot of us were around the cattle industry in 2014, 2015. We remember how quickly things shot up and how quickly things came back down. So there's a bit of a hesitancy there to think about how long these strong prices will last and how do we plan in a period like that. So we're going to touch on that a little bit too. And so I'm going to start us out talking about what's going on in cattle markets, give you a few slides that I think help explain where we are and where we might be going. And then we're going to kind of jump into some of the rest of the parts of the talk. So this is a chart, Southern Plains steer calf prices. So think 400 to 500 pound steers. If you need a specific location, I use Oklahoma City whenever I'm thinking Southern Plains. Um, you know, the prices in Mississippi and Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia, the patterns are fairly similar with these. The levels may not be exactly the same. They typically get stronger prices for cattle out in Oklahoma than we do in the Southeast. But the actual patterns themselves will be very close. And what I want you to take away from this is, we're at really strong cattle prices. We have been for a while. If you look at the dotted line there in the middle, 2023 was kind of that transition year period for us from a period of low prices coming out of the pandemic into some really high prices. And we've hit record high prices this year in a lot of different categories. I will note the dip the last couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we get going. But overall, a much stronger pricing environment than we've been in for much of the past 8 to 9 years. The big driver here is cattle supplies. That's the key thing that, if you think supply and demand, beef demand has been strong, which means demand for cattle has been strong. But supplies have gotten really tight. This chart shows the calf crop each year, and you can see that we had a long period there where we declined for many years until those strong prices of 2014 kind of turned things around. We went through about 5 years of expansion, but now we've been into about 5 or really 6 years of decline. This chart does not include 2024. The 2024 calf crop is not finished yet. It's mostly finished by this point of the year, but it's not done yet. I think whenever that number does come out in January, it's going to be lower than that 2013, 2014 period. We probably got the lowest calf crop, certainly in recent history, hitting the ground this year than we've ever had. The driver behind this is fairly straightforward. We're having fewer calves because we've got fewer cows out there to calve. And if you look at what's going on, each of these little bars represents how much the percentage of beef cows changed from one year to the next. So those five red bars there from 2020 through 2024. That's the last 5 years that we have seen declines, and fairly sizable declines. A 2 to 3 or 3.5% decline in beef cows in a year is a lot of cows, and that's what's driving these lower calf crop totals. The reasons behind this, you could probably list them. We had strong prices in 14 and 15 that spurred expansion in 15, 16, 17 even. Because in this industry, the decision to expand is not an overnight decision. In this industry, you make the decision to keep that heifer calf, try to get her bred. She carries the calf for 9 months, and then you have to raise and wean that calf. I mean, it is a multi-year decision to expand in this industry. And so, we saw years of expansion based a lot on what happened in 2014 and 2015. And then of course prices left us. The strong prices left us, and we were in years of tight profit margins through much of the past 10 years. Really up until about last year did we start seeing some of these stronger prices and profitability really return to the cattle sector. I'll get into this more later, but this becomes the big question. When do we start expanding again? And we're going to talk about that as we go a little bit here. The way I like to think about that is in terms of the cattle cycle. This is the cattle cycle in this context is just talking about the low point in cattle supplies through the high point, so through the peak, and then back down to the next low point. And so this shows the last 8 cycles going back to 1938. Every one of these is from a low point in supplies through the peak, and then the cycle ends whenever the next growth period begins. So if we look at where we are, this one right here in the middle, this kind of blue one. This is the 2014 to 2024 cycle that we're still in. We are going to have declining supplies in 2024 too. So we are about to hit year 11 of this current cycle. Now, the amazing thing, or the interesting thing, whatever you want to say, is all these cycles are about 10 years long. We've only had 2 of them that have gone longer than 11 years, and we're about to hit year 11. The end of these cycles are characterized by stronger prices. Typically, it's those stronger prices that incentivize producers to hold back heifers, to not cull their cows as deep as they have been, which would ultimately lead to more calves being produced the following year. We're just not there yet. We're not there yet. I can't see the end of this cycle yet from the data that I look at. I'm going to share some of that with you here tonight. The first thing I like to look at is heifers held back as beef cow replacements. This number comes from January. We used to get a July number too, but that report was canceled by USDA NASS this year. So now we're still working with a January number, but it's still pretty informative. And if you'll notice over here on the axis, this isn't zero. I've zoomed in to this 4.5 million head to 7 million head range. But you know, in 2015, 2016, 2017, we were retaining more than 6 million head of heifers to be beef cow replacements the next year. The last 2 years, we've held back fewer than 5 million head of heifers. That's a million head of heifers is a pretty big deal, and we've continued to see smaller decline, but a decline here nonetheless. So if we look at the next one, I like to look at is heifers as a percent of total cattle on feed. Um, to me, this is telling because if there's a high percentage of heifers on feed, that means there are fewer heifers that are staying in pasture to be productive. And I think that's exactly what this chart tells us. You can look at 2015, 2016, those periods of expansion. We saw really low percentage of heifers sitting in feedlots. But if we think about what's happened since then, the percentage has creeped up. Now we're up to around 39, 40% of heifers are cattle in feedlots are heifers. Sorry about that. I lost you there for a second. So this is a telling number because it tells us that we've got more cattle or more heifers going into feedlots than we have had. The next one that I think is a really big piece of this currently is corn prices have finally come down. Now, this is not great for corn producers. They're sweating this for sure, and some tough times for row crop growers in a lot of instances. But for livestock producers who have been buying these grains for feed inputs, we're in a markedly different environment than we were not too long ago. Now, I know your mixed feed prices may not have come down near as much as this chart is showing, but we're closer to some much lower grain prices this year and as we look into next year, which can also help improve the overall profitability of cattle production. So the question here, how long will it last? The first thing I'll point out is that seasonal patterns appear to be occurring this year, and I got a chart here I want to show you before we get into the next two pieces. So when I say seasonal patterns, what I'm talking about is how prices change throughout the year. So far we've been talking about what prices have done over a decade, over longer periods of times. You have these periods of growth, and when you have growth in supplies, you typically see declining prices, and then you have these periods of decline in supplies, what we're in right now. That's helping push up the price of cattle overall. But within any given year, you still have these strong seasonal patterns. And so this chart looks at what these seasonal patterns do in Mississippi. So the blue line there, the middle line is the one I want you to kind of focus on. And all this does is takes the average price for a given year. So what were cattle prices for the year? And then it compares, sorry. Then it compares the price for each month to that average. So anything above one, you've got higher than average cattle prices during that month. And anything below one, that means it's a time of the year when prices are typically lower. This lets us compare month to month. It's basically just creating an index here that allows us to compare when is the time of year when prices are typically the lowest. You can see from the chart here in Mississippi, September, October, these are our seasonal low points of the year for five weight steers. It matches up with when we sell most of our steers in Mississippi. I imagine this is very similar to what happens in Alabama and Tennessee. I've looked at Alabama, it's really similar. We see our lowest within year prices during these late summer, early fall months, which is, of course, where we are now. What's interesting about this is let's look at last year. You've already seen this from Southern Plains, but here it is from Mississippi, the maroon line right there in the middle. You got to squint really hard to see any inclination of a seasonal pattern in 2023. 2023, like I said earlier, was this transition year. We really kind of blew past a lot of these seasonal pressures. Prices either remained steady, even some of those months they went up during months when they would typically decline. We saw a little bit of a dip in October, but not much. This year is shaping up to have some stronger seasonal patterns than the past year did. 2023 was really similar to 2014. If you look at 2014, there were no seasonal pressures or no seasonal patterns to be seen. The pressures were there, but the overall price levels kind of pushed past it. So in 2024, we've seen a dip the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. Futures prices have been off from where they were not too long ago. I do think a big part of this are these seasonal patterns that we would expect to see in a normal year that we just didn't see last year. But again, price is still much higher than we have been in a lot of years. So how long will it last? There are no clear signs of expansion yet. And to me, that's one of the biggest things to kind of lean on to say that I don't think these prices are leaving us anytime soon, these stronger prices. And if you really look at when prices typically peak, it's whenever people do start holding back heifers. So if you think about the total number of calves out there for sale that could turn into feedlot cattle and ultimately be turned into beef. That's all the steers and that's all of the heifers that people aren't holding back. So that's the size of the pie. But whenever, and that number has been getting smaller because our calf crop has gone down. But right now that pie is still being inflated by us continuing to send a lot of heifers, higher levels of heifers than we saw during the last expansion period. Whenever producers do start holding back more heifers, then you have a tight supply of calves, of cattle, and you hold back more of them out of the beef supply or out of the supplies that will be turned into beef because you're holding them back to be reproductive. That's when the supplies of stocker cattle, feedlot cattle, however you want to say it, gets the tightest. And that's typically when we see the strongest prices. We haven't hit that yet. We haven't hit what I think are our tightest supply periods for this particular cycle yet. Another key thing here, and it's not just for cattle, it's for everything that we do. Interest rates are really important. In 2014, somebody who wanted to get into the cattle business or somebody who wanted to expand their current cattle herd, you could go borrow money at much different rates than you could go borrow money right now. The math is different when you're trying to buy cattle using borrowed money at 4% than it is buying cattle at 11 or 12%, whatever it is that you could get. I think that's going to drag out how long these prices last as well, because I don't think it's going to be as easy for a lot of producers to expand the way they did in 2014. And then, of course, cost of production is important. We know the cost of pretty much everything has increased over the past, well, certainly since COVID. We've seen inflation in most categories. So I think that's a different scenario than we had in 14 and 15 as well. All this to say is I don't see the end of this cycle yet. And because of that, I don't see us heading towards a period of low prices very soon. I'm certainly still very bullish on prices this year and into 2025. It's going to take me seeing something that suggests that we are expanding this herd before I start to get nervous about a big decline in prices. All right, we'll switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about some things that buyers look for whenever they're looking at cattle. The first thing I want to throw out there is where can I get market information? This is a question I'll get sometimes. There's great resources out there. The first one for Tennessee, check out the Tennessee Weekly Livestock Auction Market summaries. There's one for the whole state. There's one for every auction barn out there that participates with USDA, AMS, and Tennessee Department of Ag. It's a great resource to be able to see week to week what prices are doing. Cattle futures prices, you can go to the CME website and check out what cattle futures prices are doing. Another good indicator of kind of overall market patterns at the time. Here's the Tennessee Daily Cattle Auction Summary. Y'all have a daily one there. We only have a weekly one here in Mississippi, but this averages, uh, this is the daily average for whatever cattle sold on Wednesday, September 11th in Tennessee. You can see it's broken out by weight category, number of head, and range, and look at that average price can be really telling about what's going on. So what impacts these prices that we see whenever we go sell cattle at the stockyard, or we sell cattle on a board sale, or we sell cattle, however we sell them, what are the drivers of these prices? There's actually been quite a bit of research done on this, and I want to share some of that with you tonight. The first biggest one, and this is a tough question to talk about sometimes, is location. You know, most of the cattle that we're producing here in the Southeast is not going to live its whole life here in the Southeast. They're going to head either west of us or maybe north of us up to Iowa, or up towards Nebraska or Kansas or Oklahoma, uh, Texas, wherever. Probably going to head closer to where the feedlots are. We don't have a lot of big feedlots here in the Southeast, so our prices typically are lower than what you would see in Oklahoma or Nebraska or Iowa, because those cattle have to get transported to where we are in Mississippi or where you are in Tennessee to one of these locations. So this transportation cost gets reflected in the price that we see for our cattle here. Lot size is another big one. I mean, the takeaway here is the closer you can get to having a trailer load of cattle, typically the better off you're going to be in terms of price. And so feeder cattle are moved in 50,000-pound loads. Buyers at stockyards or buyers wherever, if they're intending to take these cattle somewhere else, they're trying to fill up their trailer. They don't want to be hauling a half-empty trailer across the country. And so they either look for producers who can give them a full load or close to a full load, or they've got to buy smaller groups and put them together. And whenever you buy smaller groups and put them together, then you introduce issues like, you know, the cattle coming from different health protocols, and you've got additional risk there that you're going to, as a buyer, you're going to be more cautious about putting together 10 smaller groups of cattle into a load than you would be one producer or two producers that have the same health protocols and their cattle have already been intermingled. So that's why we typically see these lots that are closest to 50,000 pounds usually bring the strongest prices. Little illustration here, nothing fancy. So say we've got two lots here, lot A and lot B. If the first one is 65 steers, they average 750 pounds. That's getting up there really close to a 50,000-pound load. A buyer can buy this and pretty much fill his trailer up. Lot B, on the other hand, you've got 13 steers. They still average 750 pounds, but this is only roughly 10,000 pounds. And so somebody buying this that's planning on taking these cattle somewhere else, they're going to need to find another 40,000 pounds to put with this. So they're going to have to be buying multiple lots. You're probably going to get stronger prices for lot A than you will for lot B. Now, I will point out this doesn't have to be all the same person's cattle. There are lots of success stories of neighbors or producers nearby getting together, syncing up their breeding programs, syncing up their health programs, their vaccination programs, to where they can put together from multiple herds a load lot that looks similar and has had similar health protocols, and then they sell them together, and they typically can get stronger prices for that. Here's a chart, lot size impacts from Hallett and Burdine. This is from University of Kentucky. You can see here the price improvement per head is the way they looked at it. So if you use one head, selling one head at a time is the baseline here. From their work, if you can get up to that 25 to 45 or higher head per lot, you can get 15 to 20 bucks more per hundredweight. So that's 15 to 20 bucks more per 100 pounds. It can make a big difference in the way that you market these cattle. Some other ones here. This is from a survey MSU Extension did. It's been about 10 years since this study came out, but I do think it's still very, very true. They found castration was added 10 cents per pound for a 550-pound steer. That gets higher the heavier the animal gets, because it's harder to castrate as those cattle get heavier. Muscle score 10 cents per pound for a muscle score 1 versus muscle score 3. So if you can have those cattle in good muscle shape, buyers typically are going to pay attention to that. Horns had a 15-cent per pound dock. Body condition score, anything less than a body condition score of 5, had about a nickel per pound dock. An interesting one was temperament. So the way this survey was performed is, they sent recorders to stockyards, and there was some subjectivity here in that the people doing the survey were having to assign a temperament score to every animal that went through the sale barn. But if they determined that an animal was aggressive, those cattle typically brought 3 to 4 cents lower per pound than if the cattle were not deemed aggressive. Here's one from University of Tennessee. A 10% increase in corn prices correlated with a $1.52 per hundredweight decline in feeder cattle prices in Tennessee. I showed you the corn chart earlier. These stronger corn prices, or these weaker corn prices, I should say, are a supportive thing for cattle prices. Those two markets move almost opposite of each other. The corn prices go down, we typically see stronger cattle prices. And also we've got the supply side issue support here as well. Home raised lots were about $2 per hundredweight higher. They found black hatted cattle were about a little over $2, just under $3 premium over non-black hatted cattle in Tennessee. So there's some stuff out there that buyers kind of pay attention to, and whenever you work on marketing your cattle, you can kind of think through some of these to try to put forth the product that buyers are willing to pay the most for. I want to spend a little bit of time on this one because I think it's really cool. I've never seen a survey or a study like this done in the cattle industry until this one came out. The data is from 2017 that the paper just came out either this year or last year. Oklahoma State, they sent out surveys to Oklahoma cattle producers, and the goal was to try to figure out what stocker cattle buyers are looking for. And so the next few tables I show you is going to show the percentage of these buyers that cared about that particular attribute. And so I'm going to show you a list of attributes, and then it's going to be the percentage you see is going to be what percent of the total buyers cared about that thing. And to me, this was really, really interesting because it shows us the diversity that we're going to have in our buying group. So the first one is specific breed. Almost 70% of buyers out of this sample said that they did care about breed. Now it doesn't say which breed, and it doesn't say if they care if it's one particular breed or if it just can't be one particular breed. But it does tell us that buyers are paying attention to that. But there was a 15% of the sample that said they didn't care at all what breed it was. So there are buyers out there that are not looking at breed characteristics whenever they're buying stocker cattle. The next one, this frame muscling discussion that we kind of touched on earlier, that clearly is a big deal to pretty much all buyers. We're bumping up on 90% of buyers say that that's either important or very important whenever they're looking at cattle. Very few of them claim they didn't care about that. Size and weight's another one. Buyers typically are trying, if they're grouping cattle or if they're buying smaller lots to put together a load, a lot of times they're trying to buy similar sizes or get groups of similar sizes pulled together. So again, we see 85-ish% of buyers out of this sample say that size and weight matters. Most of those are fairly straightforward. Certified preconditioned. So, can you show that your cattle have been weaned and preconditioned? And, this one was kind of interesting to me because 30% or so said that it was important or very important, but you actually had quite a few that said they didn't care about that whenever they were looking for cattle. Now, that could be that, they're trying to buy not preconditioned cattle who have not been preconditioned at a lower price so that then they can do that, add that value to the cattle for the next round. But anyways, interesting results there. Purchasing animals from a specific geographic region. About 45% said this was important, but you had about almost 40% say this was not either slightly important or not important. So some variation there depending on the buyers. And same for avoiding animals from a specific geographic region. About 45% of buyers said yes, they want to avoid animals from some specific geographic area, which unfortunately could be areas like the Southeast, or it could be other areas that the survey doesn't specify. Last thing here to look at, distance shipped, very important for about 63%, or important or very important for about 63% of the buyers here. One of the most important things was trying to avoid trader cattle. So trying to avoid those cattle that people are just buying and then trying to turn around and sell pretty quickly. 85% or so were trying to avoid those cattle and instead trying to get cattle that were coming off the farm. And then source, method of purchase was important to, over touching on 60%, over 60% of buyers were paying attention to where they're getting their cattle from, whether it be stockyard or board sale or straight off the farm. They really cared about method of purchase. This is the cool part. They had all this data and they got those results I just showed you. And then they used something called a latent class model. It's what it's called and how it got there is not really all that important for what we're talking about tonight. But the model then pushes these buyers into one of four groups. It identifies how many kind of unique groups are there in this set of respondents. And so this particular set of respondents, there were four kind of different types of buyers. You can see the third group there was the largest. Second was the fourth was second largest, and the second was third largest. The Oak State crew called these different groups. The group one was the risk takers. These were the folks that they didn't care if they were preconditioned, didn't care what breed they were, didn't care where they came from. They were buying trader cattle. They were taking the risk. They are willing to take on those high risk cattle in order to try to add value and make money on them. The second one is Amazon shoppers, is what they called it. So the reasoning for calling it that is they're very specific about what they want, but they don't care where it comes from. So when you go buy that thing on Amazon, you read the details about what it is, but you don't know who's sending it to you most of the time. Number three there is the risk avoider. And so that's the type of buyers who, care about the attributes. They care about all the attributes that help them minimize the risk of things like death loss, or they're trying to look for cattle that are going to gain well. So these are the groups that are trying to avoid taking on additional risk whenever they buy cattle. And then you've got the upscale shopper. And so this particular group, they are specific about characteristics, but they're also specific about where they get it from. So they're going to have strong preferences about where the cattle come from, what kind of breed they are, how they purchased it. The folks that are, you're more brand loyal, maybe is the right word there. I thought this was really cool. And one of the takeaways I get from this is we got a lot of different kind of buyers out there. The results I showed you previously were kind of some averages. This is on average what you can expect to get more for your cattle if you do this, this, and this. This study shows us that while that is true on average, uh, there are a lot of different buyers out there looking for a lot of different things. And so it's important to kind of know what you got and then adjust your marketing strategy uh, to fit what you have. So some other points to consider there on just trying to get the most for your cattle. We've already talked about combining groups with someone who uses similar management practices. Um, Tell potential buyers about your cattle. Even if you're selling them at the stockyard, if you've got a group of cattle, you're planning on selling them at your local stockyard, it still helps you if you call up some people who you know might be interested and say, hey, I'm taking this group of cattle. They're this, 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 this. They're going to sell at Coleman Stockyard on this date. Do a little bit of your own marketing, even whenever you're taking them to the stockyard to sell them. That can really help you out in some cases. Strongly consider risk management, especially if you're leveraged. And this is the point in the presentation where I transition a bit to LRP. Uh, if you're leveraged, if you've borrowed money to buy these cattle, or if you've borrowed money to buy the equipment or the fencing or whatever, and you've got your operation really depends on how much you get for these cattle every year. Considering some price risk management is a really important part of this. And so I'm going to use the last little bit of time here talking about LRP. Livestock risk protection. It's a USDA product. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's kind of managed through USDA's risk management agency. It was a privately developed product that USDA agreed to support and offer to producers and agreed to subsidize the cost of, which is the key part. It's designed to offer protection against downside price risk. So we're at really high cattle prices now. Maybe you're worried about what prices are going to do between right now and whenever you plan to sell your cattle. Maybe you're holding back all of your spring calves and you plan on selling them in spring of 2025. A tool like this allows you to protect yourself against big price declines between now and March of 2025, for example. It does not establish the price that somebody's going to pay you. That's one of the misconceptions about this. Really what it does, it establishes a kind of price floor based on national level feeder cattle prices. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. The key benefit, or not key benefit, the key benefit to this is you can do it on as few as one head. But one of the key reasons producers like it is because it still leaves you open to price increases. And it doesn't lock you in at a price that you have to sell for this amount in March. All it's doing is protecting your downside. You're paying a premium, an insurance premium, to protect your downside on the price, on potential price declines. 3 to 12 months in advance. So we're sitting here in September, so October, November, December. The soonest you could do this far is if you intended to sell calves in December, and you could do it all the way out through next summer. Say you intended to sell some next summer, you could go ahead and lock those in with LRP. It likely uses futures prices to forecast how much it expects prices to be in the future. I say likely because we don't know this for sure. It's a proprietary calculation on how they come up with their expected prices, but futures prices likely play a part here. And then it uses the CME feeder cattle index as a trigger. And by trigger, what I mean is when you get to the end of that period, if this CME feeder cattle index is below the price that you locked in at, then you get a payment. We're gonna walk through some examples on that. Key point here before I go any further, producers who use LRP, they still have every incentive to earn as much possible for their own cattle. LRP is not a replacement for marketing. You should still try to market your cattle, do everything that you can to get the highest possible price whenever you sell your cattle to somebody else. LRP is just a layer there that helps protect you against a big national decline in prices. Here's some specifics on LRP. Calves, steers, heifers, Brahma, dairy, even unborn calves. That's a relatively new thing. You're going to choose a weight. It's either going to be calves under 600 pounds, or you're going to choose those heavier feeders that range between 600 to 1,000 pounds. I don't want to get too deep into this because we can get buried in the weeds, but you choose coverage levels. This basically is kind of like you think about your insurance policies where you've got to kind of choose your coverage level of what your house is worth or what your barn is worth. How much do you want to insure it for? Similar thing here. How much you can use this coverage level to adjust how much do you want to insure your cattle for, essentially, in terms of prices. You're not insuring them against the animal dying. You're not insuring them against the animal getting sick. You're only insuring against the price going down from what it was expected to be whenever you bought the policy. You can do up to 12,000 head per contract, up to 25,000 head per year. But the key thing here is you can do it on one head. This is not like a futures contract where you need 50,000 pounds. You can do this on a per head basis. So somebody with 3 head of steers or 3 head of heifers could use LRP to protect themselves against price declines. I mentioned earlier it was subsidized. The reason more people are talking about LRP now than they were 5 years ago is because that subsidy has shot up. It used to be 13% across the board. Now it's 35 to 55%, depending on your coverage level that you choose. Another big change here is that now premiums are paid at the end of your endorsement period. So if you choose today to buy a policy with an ending date in March of 2025, you're going to owe a premium, your insurance premium. It will cost you something, but you don't have to pay that until March of 2025. And it was a smart move here to do that because that's when you're going to earn revenue, right? That's when you're going to sell your cattle and have the money to be able to pay that premium cost. Don't dig in too deep here. I'm just showing that the subsidy rates have increased since 2021. So depending on your coverage level that you choose, that's going to affect your subsidy rate. So LRP advantages, smaller numbers, premium subsidy increase, no brokerage or margin, although you do still have to find a crop insurance agent to buy this from. It's available in months when there's no futures or options. Coverage prices are available daily. Now that's a benefit, but it can also make this product confusing. It's what the contracts or the coverage levels you can buy change every single day. And so you've got to be you got to watch this product and learn about it so that whenever the day comes that you're ready to pull the trigger on it, you've got a pretty good handle on how it works. Some disadvantages, some reasons you might consider doing something else. It's not as flexible as futures and options. So if you've ever traded futures or options before, you can get out of those, in and out of those almost any time. You don't have to keep it all the way until March of 2025, even if it's a March of 2025 contract. But LRP, you're locked in until that ending point. So there's no exercise in it to try to profit from it. You're still subject to basis risk. I want to talk about that. I've already mentioned it can be a little bit confusing. Basis risk is the big one here, because it's based on the CME feeder cattle index. So what I mean by basis risk is you've got this CME index that triggers this product, and then you've got what you actually receive for your cattle when you sell them. As long as those two things move up and down together, LRP works great, because your price will be moving, this price will be moving. If your price goes down, the national prices go down, it should trigger a payment for you. But those things aren't perfect. And so if we look at this is the map of where the CME feeder cattle index is calculated from. It's calculated from 8-weight steer sales in these states. Tennessee's not part of this. Mississippi's not part of this. Alabama's not part of this. So the cattle we sell are not being reflected by that CME index. But as long as the cattle that we sell correlate pretty well with the cattle in the CME index, or the prices correlate pretty well, this thing should still work pretty well. And this is a chart of just that. I'm comparing 5 weights in Mississippi to the CME index. Of course, the CME index is reflecting 8 weights. So 8-weight prices nationally are somewhat similar to 5-weight prices in Mississippi because of that location difference. But the key takeaway here is that most of the time, these things are moving pretty close together. It catches the big downtrends, it catches the big uptrends. This would make me feel pretty good about LRP being a good risk management tool, if I were using it to protect my cattle. Here it is for 7-weight steers in Mississippi. Again, they move together, so LRP should be a good tool for that. This is my last slide, then I'll stop talking. Hypothetical LRP net price outcomes. So this is just if you used LRP, I'm using a $255 per hundredweight coverage level. It's pretty similar to what's available out there right now for January contract. I think it was at $253 today or yesterday. I'm assuming there's a $10 basis. And so what I'm really saying there is I'm assuming that the price you're going to receive for your cattle is $10 less than that CME feeder cattle index will be. I'm baking in this assumption that Tennessee cattle are going to bring less than that national average price. It may not. Everybody's cattle are different. We're just using $10 as an example here. And then I'm assuming the LRP is going to cost me $7 per hundredweight. And that's after the subsidy is taken out. So let's look at some examples here. So let's say this is for January of 2025, and we get to January of 2025, and the LRP ending value in January 2025 is $275 per hundredweight. So this means the feeder cattle index is higher than we expected prices to be whenever we bought this contract right now. We bought it right now expecting prices to be $255 in January, but actually the market's done better than that, where prices have gone up over that time period. In that scenario, the payout you're going to get is zero because the prices are better than what you protected yourself against. So with that $10 basis, we're going to assume that you sold your cattle for $265. However you sold them, you got $10 less than the national average. And so your take home is $258 per hundredweight because you still had to pay the $7 premium. That's something you have to pay. So in this case, you didn't use the insurance. You had to pay the insurance premium, but you didn't use the insurance. This is what you take home. Similar if cattle prices are at $265. Again, they went up. You're not getting a payout from the insurance. You're still having to pay your premium, so your take home is $248. Where it gets interesting is where you get below that. So at $255, this is the scenario that prices are exactly what you expected them to be. So you don't get a payout. You still have to pay insurance premium. So 238 per hundredweight is what you're taking home. That's the minimum that this is the floor that we're talking about. Because if prices do go down, so let's say you expect them to be 255, that's where you locked it in at on LRP. But now prices in January are actually $245 for that CME index. So now you're getting a $10 payout from LRP because you insured at 255 and price is at 245. So that's the $10 minus the $7 premium. So you're netting $3 per hundredweight from LRP, and you can add that to what you actually sell your cattle for. So here we're saying you sold your cattle for 235 per hundredweight. So your take home, whenever national prices are at 245, is the same as it was when national prices are at 255. Or if you want to think about it locally, your take home at 245 for what you got whenever you sold your cattle at the sale barn is the same as if you sold them at 225 at the sale barn, because LRP is paying you that difference, or it's the insurance is kicking in because you had this bad event happen of prices going down. So just to wrap up and I'll stop, LRP protects you against national price declines. You're still subject to basis risks. It allows you to take advantage of strong markets like we have now. Expectations for cattle prices are still strong. It's way more fun to do risk management whenever people expect good prices than it is to wait until prices are bad and then do price risk management. And final point there is really one of the few risk management tools available for smaller producers. All right, that's all I've got. I talked longer than I intended to, but we covered a lot of ground there. Last thing here is I work with James Mitchell at University of Arkansas, Kenny Burdine at University of Kentucky. We put out a weekly newsletter, totally free. If it's something you want to receive, you can scan this or email me. I'd be happy to get you on the list. I know University of Tennessee, y'all got your own newsletters, so certainly don't want to clutter your inbox, but I just wanted to plug this one time. And with that, thank y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Maples. In the Q&A box, we've got just 5 questions. If anyone else has any quick ones, we'll get those. We'll have to hop off here in just a few minutes, but I can either read those questions off to you, or if you click the Q&A box, they should pop up as well. Either way is fine.
Yeah, I got them. You may just read it and then answer it.
That'd be great.
The first one, with the high demand for land and the higher prices for land, will the cattle supply continue to drop and drive up cattle prices? The second part of that, I think, is yes. I think the high demand for land factors into those stronger or higher production costs that we're seeing. So it's one of the pieces that are leading to expansion this time around not looking like it did in 2014, 2015. So I do think that's contributing to these stronger prices. Second question, what percentage of heifers in the feedlot is considered the point of expansion in the cow herd? I don't think it's a particular percentage. What I'm really just looking for is a trend downward. And so right now we're at that 38, 39% of cattle sitting in feedlots or heifers. If I start to see that thing trending down from 38, 39 down to 37, 36, 35, certainly if we saw the rapid decline that we saw in 2015, that would be a clear signal that we're expanding. But right now we've just kind of been bouncing around that same period. So I'm looking for 2 consecutive quarters of a decline in the percentage of cattle on feed that are heifers, and we just haven't seen that yet. You've listed many bullish factors that are supporting high cattle prices. Do you see negative catalysts that could upset prices? For example, reduced consumption of beef due to family budget constraints, or beef alternatives such as chicken, pork, plant-based. Also, slaughter prices are under pressure by the big packers, which disincentivizes the feedlot producer to purchase stockers. Yeah, I mean, there are headwinds out there. I mean, I know my hawks right now are pretty bullish because we've got really strong prices. The biggest headwind out there to me, and this person kind of alluded to it a little bit, is what goes on with the broader macro conditions. Um, as far as the cost of beef goes, that's something we were talking about in 2021, 2022. The question was always out there, man, how high can these beef prices go and people still buy them? The answer so far has been they can go pretty dang high and people still buy a lot of beef. Beef demand has been not quite as strong this year as it was in 2021 and 2022, but still really strong by most standards. Certainly really strong compared to before 2020. So I do think that people are shifting down a little bit, so they may not be going for the tenderloin. They may be shifting down to a different beef product. But man, we really are still moving a whole lot of beef right now at some pretty strong prices. To me, the broader kind of macroeconomic concerns of, do we enter a recession? Do people really, really start tightening up their belts in terms of their budgets? I know we're starting to see some of that. That's one of those things that you could start to see creep into affecting the demand side of this story. Um, so yeah, great questions on what the potential negative side of this could be. Right now, I really do think the supply side is kind of overpowering that, though. You mentioned multiple studies that supported higher price per hundredweight associated with larger lots and value-added features. Most of those studies were conducted during periods of much lower prices per hundredweight. Do you believe those premiums could be higher now due to higher overall prices? Yes. I will say the MSU study was done in 2014 when prices were pretty similar to now. So the ones I mentioned from MSU study are probably fairly close, honestly, in terms of levels. But the rest of them, you could probably, add 50% or more to what those values were to get closer to the value in today's market. Why do black-eyed cattle bring more money? I don't have a really great answer for you, and I know that people that raise black-headed cattle will tell you because it's better quality, and I know people that raise not black-headed cattle will tell you that that's crazy. So I can't settle that debate. I've seen plenty of numbers out there that support both sides of the argument. But the reason black-headed cattle bring more money is in the market that we're in right now, most buyers are looking for those black-headed cattle. So we've study after study has shown that hides that are predominantly black, especially if you can start hitting that CAB premium. So if it's 50% more black, you've got a chance for those cattle to hit the certified Angus beef premium whenever they go through the processing plant. There is definitely some value there. So that's one thing. And then it could also be some perceived quality attributes that buyers are looking for. Let's see, last year I signed with Hudson Group for livestock price coverage. Is this the same group? I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to here. If Hudson Group it could be a crop insurance agent that sells LRP. I'm not sure from the question how to answer it. If that's the direction you're going, then there's a lot of different agents out there that you can use to buy LRP. So if this Hudson Group is one of them, then I'm guessing they're probably still doing it. I haven't heard of anybody stop selling LRP right now. Last one, how can you afford to enter the cattle market with the price of land? Yeah, that's going to be very location specific. You certainly can't afford to do it where I am, right around a college town. I'm sure it's really hard to find anywhere to put cattle in anywhere close to Knoxville right now, or anywhere close to Nashville right now. We're, like I mentioned earlier, we're across the line in Alabama, and we feel the squeeze all the time from Nashville and Huntsville. And so it's I think that's going to drive some of where we do see the expansion. We may see expansion in regions where land prices are more affordable, or maybe parts of the state where you can still get a hold of some decent acreage, but it's tough. It's really hard. Last one I see up here right now is what role does regenerative agriculture play when factoring in overhead? I think it really depends on which kind of regenerative ag that you're doing. I understand that term can be it can be used to capture a lot of different production practices. So if these are production practices that lead to it taking longer to get that animal to sell weight, then you've got a longer period there that you're having to carry that animal, so you've got higher overhead cost. But you also, maybe there's some practices there that help reduce the amount of feed cost you have, or some other factor. My response to that is, oh, here's the follow-up: intensive rotational grazing for soil benefit. Yeah, I mean, my gut reaction there is you do have some additional labor costs for sure, and probably some fencing costs if you're moving them around quite a bit. So I would think that some of your costs would be higher, but maybe some of your supplementation cost and your feed cost could be a little bit lower there. With the increased popularity of LRPs, insurance providers are having to offload more risk to the futures market. Have you studied the influence on futures contract price dynamics? I have looked at this. If you remember fall of last year, this was a huge topic whenever the cattle market took a dip and everybody was blaming the risk being offloaded into futures markets. These, my understanding of this, and this is the world from Josh's eyes and Josh's study on this. So take that for what it's worth. So these LRP agents, they're part of a broader insurance company umbrella, and then they typically offload their risk to some other reinsurer, and then that reinsurer may offload it to some other reinsurer. At some point along the way, it is possible for these companies to use the futures markets to protect themselves. So if they've got a position that price is going down, they want to protect themselves against that happening, they could technically use the futures market to do that. I don't think that happens a lot, and I'll tell you why. The futures market, feeder cattle futures market, and live cattle futures markets are not extremely liquid. And so if you're talking about big volumes, it can be really hard to get in and out of the feeder cattle futures markets with big volumes at any given time. Uh, what I think I've learned is that these reinsurers oftentimes are looking at other markets to try to hedge some of their risks. So not necessarily feeder cattle market futures markets or live cattle futures markets. They may be doing cross hedges with some other basket of other products. I don't think it's as straightforward as them sell LRP to a bunch of producers and then go hedge it in the futures market. I just don't think there's enough liquidity in the futures market to allow them to effectively do that. But it's a really great question. Do you see artificial intelligence expanding into our cattle operations? Yes, I do. It's I see it expanding in ways that they can help. It's one of those new technologies that it can scare you. The analogy my wife and I like to joke about is whenever we got one of those robot vacuums, and my dog is still terrified of that thing 2 years later. That's how we feel about AI sometimes, is that it's this new scary thing that we don't know how it's going to affect our lives. But I do see it being able to help you answer a lot of questions, and using it as a resource that you've got a problem. You can potentially use AI to not only schedule some of the things that you do in your operation, but also to help you kind of understand and think about some of the problems that you're having. I don't think any of us know enough about AI. I've watched way too many videos or training sessions about using AI, and what all of the experts in AI tell me is that whatever you know about AI right now will be old news 6 months from now. It's evolving that rapidly. So what I'm trying to do is learn it now and stay up to date, and so that it can potentially be uh, built into the workflows of not only what I'm doing, but also what everybody in every industry is doing. I better stop talking about that. I can get on a real soapbox.
You're good. Those are great questions, everybody. I always love to see just the wide variety of questions we get on Master Beef each year, so it always excites me. With all of that being said, this concludes night 4 of our Master Beef series. So we certainly thank you, Dr. Maples, for joining us tonight and sharing some insight with us all the way in Tennessee. So again, thank you, and we're excited to see everyone back on Tuesday night. So if anyone has any questions about attendance, certifications, or any other questions for Dr. Maples, I'd be happy to get those to him. But with all that being said, we're finished. Thank you, Dr. Maples.
Thanks, everybody.